Have you spent years or even decades building your business, assuming your children are going to take it over and they say, no, we're not interested? Or even worse, maybe one of your kids wants the business, but expects you to just hand it over to him, not pay for it. So you decide, I'm going to sell the company, and this sense of entitlement can potentially undermine or even destroy the transaction. That is what we're going to address today on this podcast. Today's guest, Jeff Savlov, experienced his own family succession conflict that nearly tore his family apart. Now, as a family therapist and consultant, he's drawing on that experience to help business owners navigate that emotional minefield of succession planning. If you're facing a business transition or thinking about it 3 to 5 years and wondering how to keep your family intact through this process to avoid that emotional pain or even the potential loss of dollars, you're going to want to listen. Jeff, thanks for being with. How are you?
Yeah, Keith. Hey, thanks for having me.
So, a lot to unpack here. And I thought we would start a little bit with your story. What happened?
I will definitely get into my story. I just want to push back a little bit on the today or 3 to 5 years. I would say 10, 15, even 20 years, and that there's a lot you can do with kids when they're in elementary school and middle school to get their head in the right place around a possible future involvement in the business or succession. So let's set that aside for now. I'll go into
I stand corrected. So you're the expert. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, no, but that's what most people. So most people, I mean, you're progressive in saying 3 to 5 years. Most people are like, are in the next year or right now. I'm gonna push hard on what you and most people out there are saying, because there's a lot more opportunity than people realize. So you didn't do anything wrong. You basically did what everyone's doing, and we can get into all that. We have plenty of time, and I'm excited to do it. In terms of my background, Dad goes from high school into the Army, Korean War. He's in Germany, and he learns printing to make maps for the war effort. So he's printing maps in Germany. They're sending him to Korea. Comes back home, and he gets a specialty in lithography, which is like high-end art quality prints. Really skilled, hates working for other people. Both my parents were children of immigrants and not a lot of money, but they took what they had saved and a home equity loan and really risked everything to start his own business in New York City. It was very tough at first. Careful what you wish for. Things turned around and got super busy. And my dad was just over his head. He was a blue collar craftsman. He wasn't a manager, a leader, a CEO of a company, but he had to sort of rise to the occasion, and it was stressful. At this point, I'm late in high school, into college. I'm going evenings, weekends, whatever I could do to help him manage this. And he was just over his head, stressed out, and just a lot of yelling and kind of just a lot of yelling and criticism of me because he was frustrated and he couldn't take it out on the employees he was really mad at. And I just kept coming back like a puppy dog. My mom saw this unfolding, and she, in her wisdom, found a family therapist. And this is like 40 years ago plus, before this was a sort of a thing, family therapists and psychologists working with business families. But she found someone who was doing some of this work, and the whole family, me, dad, mom, sisters, had this. If we had more time, I'd go into the details, but it was a very transformative experience. I mean, it got into my dad's father escaping the Nazis and losing the rest of his family. And a lot of stuff came up that helped me understand my dad and even his family in a whole other way. And so, again, the short version, a transformative experience that helped our family get closer as family, just pure family, forget the business. It also was a place for me to say, Dad, I don't think we're meant to work together. And I don't even like commercial printing. If there's a good reason to not go into the family business, it's that you don't enjoy it, right?
Right.
And he supported it. I had a business degree. I went into sales and marketing in the corporate world, consumer products, technology. I had a really good run at a young age. Really, it was an exceptionally good run. And I just wasn't satisfied. And I said, man, this is not for me. I want to do what that family therapist, that psychologist did for us. If I could do that for families, I'd be super happy. And so I moved back home with mom and dad in my late 20s, which was interesting because we had all kind of matured and it was actually a pretty nice roommate situation. I went back to grad school and I studied family and group dynamics. I got trained as a family therapist. I got a lot of experience in child development and parenting and learned how to work with young children as well as teenagers and adults. And that comes in much later. And started a private practice doing talk therapy and really thought this was going to be my final stop. I loved it. And by coincidence, some of my earliest therapy clients had significantly sized businesses. I'm working with them on, marriage counseling or, our teenagers smoking pot in the basement all day,
Right.
therapy issues. But I got to know them deeply and I heard all the issues they were having around who do we leave the business to? Can our kids handle it? Some of them were owning with cousins, third generation, owning with cousins who didn't have any skills, but were getting paid the same amount. And I heard all these issues and I thought, man, with my background, having lived family business, having seen the corporate professional world, and then having all this family dynamics and psychological training, I thought I had something that was not therapy, but in the middle there between what a therapist does and what lawyers, accountants, wealth managers do. And I developed this over the last 30 years. It's coaching, facilitation, education, working with families just around how do you raise kids so they'll be responsible stewards, whether or not they go in the business. How do you work together 2, 3 generations at a time? I mean, the way humans are living now, you can easily have three, you can have 80-year-olds, 50-year-olds, and 20-year-olds at the same time. And I help them do that productively. And it's not all about conflict. A lot of families reach out to me saying, hey, we're doing great, but we want to keep it that way. Help us find the pitfalls so that we can manage them.
Right. So your story is a common story, in that you didn't have an interest in going to family business. I've been doing this. Well, we're in the statistically, I think, 20 less than 25% of businesses transition from generation one to generation two, and then when it goes goes to the third generation, it drops participation down to like less than 15%. So if you're a business owner, and from my experience, right, it's like I'm looking at my client base over the last 25 years, I'm like, how many third generation businesses have I really sold? And the answer is very few because of the stats I just gave you. But, that dynamic comes into play when, say, the kids are in the business, the owner comes to him and says, hey, I want you to take over. And then there's this kind of like, I don't want to be what I've seen you and mom at the dinner table, supper table. I've seen the conflict. I've seen the arguments. I've seen all this stuff. I see the responsibility. I like what I'm doing, but I don't want to take over. How do you that initial disappointment from the owner, right? Because that's a legacy, right? It's a legacy issue, and that maybe even shock. How do you work within that family business to kind of help them navigate that? So there's the reduce that friction, I'll call it.
Yeah. So I don't want to be a thorn in your side, but I'm going to push back again. And this time on the statistic, the research on that, 70% fail and then 12% and 3%, whatever. It really was flawed. It had a small sample size, and I spoke to the folks who actually did that original research, the most famous one, and basically, if someone grew a business from 0 to 200 million and sold it, that is still included in the sort of fail statistic because it doesn't exist. It didn't go to the next generation. So a lot of the businesses that don't make it to the next generation are considered failures in the research only because they're not there anymore. However, if you can sell a business and your kids aren't interested and you walk away with a couple of 100 million, some people would say that's a success. So there's just a lot of conflict in the field that I'm in now over what does the research really tell us and how many families sell and then maybe start a completely other business or let their kids start other businesses. So just another way of looking at it that I thought I would bring up because it's so current right now in the world that I'm in. In terms of your question, I see families where they let kids into the business who have no reason being there, or they push kids to be in the business who don't want to be there. So either they're letting in people who don't have the skills, or they're strong arming people to be there for the legacy reason who'd rather be a school teacher or whatever it is. And you see both of those. And yeah, no, I hear the legacy piece. There's something very romantic. We hear, Zildjian cymbals. The family that owns Zildjian cymbals, the cymbals for drums, is in like the 16th generation. It's very romantic, and people want that. It is a romantic idea. However, not everyone's children, not every entrepreneur's children have the skill set or the interest. And so there can be a disappointment. And if you don't get those conversations out early, you wait to the last minute to find out your kid's not capable or just not interested. And that can be a real disappointment and can blow up your whole plan.
Right. So, to your point, I'd say first generation, because a lot of them didn't, like your father, didn't go to college, but they were committed to making sure their kids went to college, right?
Yeah.
And the kids went to college to be whatever, sales and marketing, a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, a sociologist, a psychiatrist, and then they come back and say, "Why don't you want to be in the business?"
Right.
Well, I went to college and I want to have a different career. This is not of interest to me. So that kind of dynamic is, it's like, I want them in the business, but I sent them off to college to learn a whole different profession. And so now I'm at a point where I'm disappointed. Expectations aren't being met because they're doing what they want to do. Right. So it just seems like, excuse me, it seems like there's a lot of, dynamics there that can, lead to uneasiness, disappointment, conflict, within the family dynamic and the household around the dinner table at the holidays.
Yeah, absolutely. That can come up. And one of the options to manage this, and it typically takes a significant size business, or at least the next gen, the G2, the second generation, the kids, to have good careers, is to say, okay, we can keep the business alive, but you guys have to work as an ownership group. And if the business can afford to hire outside management, you can train your kids to not be operators, but to be good owners, to get some outside directors, to be a sort of a board of directors, to have other people run it and still keep the legacy alive. They can get dividends, or if they've got good careers, they can keep plugging all the profits back into the business to even grow it for the next generation and train the grandkids to be either operators or an ownership group. But that ownership group who doesn't work in the business can be a really good option, but people don't even think about it that way. It's either they're in the business or they're not, and we've lost our legacy.
Yeah. So in our lead-in, I talked a bit about, they say, no, I'm not interested, but thank you. But then the big one is they are interested, but they just don't want to pay for it, right? I mean, you have an owner build a business. You're using 200,000. I'll use 10 million. Doesn't really 2 million, 200 million. I'm using 10 million. Doesn't matter the number. The equity that the owner's family, the husband, wife, or the father, mother have created, they need to live on that money, right? So all of a sudden the kid comes in and says, I'm here. And I said, okay, let's work a deal for you to buy me out. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big concern. I'm dealing with that right now with a client, frankly, that it came out of left field. We literally down to a signed letter of intent, and one of the children decided that, well, I should have this company. What do you mean have it? You should give it to me. I mean, that is a common problem issue that, the owner, first generation, second generation, faces with that next generation.
Absolutely. And so earlier in this interview, when I said, let's take that, 3 to 5 and make it 20, that's really where the opportunity is, rather than you got a letter of intent and now the kid's like, why aren't you giving it to me? I actually wrote an article on how to talk to elementary school and middle school kids about the family business. And, you're not taking out financial statements and complex org charts, but with young kids, you can talk about the business, how hard it was to start. Kids love hearing stories, and you can say to them, literally in elementary or middle school, you might want to be in this someday. We'll have to test to see if you like it. Maybe as you get older, or even now, you could do little jobs at the business and see if you like it. And then as you start to get older, maybe in the summers, you'll work full time, all week long, during high school to see about it. And we're going to need to see that you like it and that you're good at it and that you can make it even better than we did. And then one day, you might even want to be the next owner. And we'll have to talk about how that happens. But just like I had to risk my money to start this business, you're going to have to think about how you can buy it from us. And if you had that conversation with a kid when they're 8 and when they're 12 and when they're 17, it's no shock when they're 28 or 35. This is just something that's baked in all along. And the truth is, if you're so successful that you've got so much for your retirement, you don't need it. You could gift it, and I see people do that. But when you really need the money, it's certainly good to set the expectation that we need this to have a good quality of life while we're retired. And you're going to need to find a way to pay for it. So not waiting till the last minute and having these conversations along the way to really help the next generation understand the complexity of it.
Yeah, that's a good point because we have a client or had a client, that now has since sold the business, but actually it was a friend of mine, right? And we growing up together, so we went to at 12 years old, right? We went to camp or we went to sports or something. He went to his family business and started off stocking shelves, right? He swept the floors and stocked shelves, and then. And that's what he did for a couple of years. He was in the back room, just helping out, understanding the merchandise, right? And then when he became a little older and understood it, then he was on the sales floor, right? And he was kind of helping customers. And he was selling, and then he got into some decision making things. So then we all went to college, and he went straight into the business, right? And then dial back, 40 years, 30 years forward, and he ended up selling it. I mean, him and his brother were the two of them. They both went into his brother, frankly, and this may be something to talk about because sometimes one goes into the business and the other one doesn't initially go into the business. He or she goes off and does her own thing. And then all of a sudden, 10 years later, they say, hey, I want to be in the business too. That must be a big issue that you have to deal with.
Yeah, because the one who went into the business maybe skipped college and all the benefits that go along with the, social life and friends you make and all that and worked hard and maybe significantly grew it. Now you have a sibling that's like, hey, we should inherit this or be gifted it or buy it 50-50. And the one sibling who made all that sacrifice is like, well, that doesn't really sound so fair.
Right.
So that absolutely happens. And a lot of family businesses, fair to a lot of families, in air quotes there, means equal, the same number to too
Right.
many families. And it really is about, equality, justice, and some tough conversations. But, you have to have the conversation. You have to talk about what's fair. You have to look at scenarios before they happen so that it's not this shock that comes up and then can undermine the family and the business alike. I mean, the repetitive theme here is communication early and often about all the ways this could play out so people, have some sense about what to expect and how to possibly handle it.
Yeah. So I wrote it down here. I quote, the fairness trap. I mean, that's a big issue. That's a big thing. I mean, whether there's multiple children in the business or one or two are in the business and then one's not or a couple are not. And then all of a sudden they hear that, mom or dad are selling the company and the one that's in the business who's helped build a business, make those sacrifices. I mean, how do you deal with that? How do you come to resolution with that conflict, that dissension or the two different viewpoints, because money's money, right? And people, that's what they're thinking about here, right? So how do you help the families kind of resolve all that?
Yeah, it can be tough. A lot depends on sort of the culture of the family. Are they a family that has kind of looking out for the greater good? Do they have a team mentality? I like to say family business is a team sport, like hockey or soccer or football. And some family members are, singles tennis players, and they're not thinking about the greater good and sort of being part of a team. And so part of it has to do with the culture of the family and how they are about humility and generosity and fairness. And again, it's looking through some of these scenarios well before they happen. The truth is, Keith, most families don't do that. And so when they
Right.
come to me, the majority are already angry and having some kind of conflict. And you need to sort of sit people down, look at the history of what's happened, and sort of bring up the different points of view. Yes, you thought you were going to get 50%, like your brother, because there's two of you, and this is mom and dad's gift. Is it fair that he spent 15 years before you were there, bringing it from 5 million to 20 million in revenues? And should he be paid for that, either in ownership or financially? And sometimes in that situation, the family will be reasonable and say, you know what, maybe we can own it 50-50, but he'll get a big chunk of cash if mom and dad have it to give, or will own it 50-50, but he'll get a larger salary for 5 years for the time he put in, and then we'll equalize the salary. But families often can sit down, especially when there's love in the family, and
Right.
have the kind of conversation that I just told you. That's a specific story with two brothers. Both went to college, but one went college into the business, one went college into international finance. So he wasn't a slacker. He
Right.
had experience that really could help the business. And when he came in, he's like, "Am I really going to get paid 100 grand a year less than my brother forever, even though I have all this great experience I'm bringing?" And that's what they decided. The brother that came in said, "Yes, let my brother who's been there, let him have a significantly higher salary for 5 years. Then we'll go to the same salary, and I will co-run it with him." And they made peace and had a great brother relationship and a nice thriving business.
Well, you know what, Jeff, this is, and I think we can probably spend the whole day talking about this, and that's a great way to kind of like segue into, having a nice outcome. But I'd love to have you come back for another episode and maybe talk more in detail, maybe some of the success stories or maybe not success stories you've had in your career
Yeah.
on helping families through this succession planning. So love to have you come back. Really appreciate your time today. And if you can do that, that would be great.
I'd love to come back. Thanks, Keith.
We did another podcast, Selling a Family Business from Conflict to Cash, where we discuss a number of reasons why successful transitions stall, fail, and how to navigate those to a successful outcome. Just click the link below to watch. Thank you.